This is the walkthrough for exercise 3, the simple calculator. Now this is an application, it's a slightly more complex application than we have dealt with previously. But the purpose of this program is to create a relatively simplistic calculator. I'm going to go through this program with you. First I want to show you essentially what the end result is. So the idea behind this program is to allow the user to enter two numbers and then enter a mathematical operation, enter a number that represents a mathematical operation. I am going to show you I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to look at this. I'm going to show you both an if statement option immediately, and then I want to show you what a switch statement version of this would look like. So let's get started here. I'm going to run this program. And we're going to come down here to the simple calculator and we're going to be asked to enter a number. And I am going to go ahead and enter the number 25. I'm going to be asked to enter another number. To keep this math simple, I'm going to enter 25. And then I'm asked to select a mathematical operator. And in this case, I'm going to choose addition, just again to keep it simple so we know what the answer is supposed to be. And the result is, of course, 50. Now we know that. We know that 25 plus 25 is 50. Let's take a look at what's going on here. First, I'm just going to walk you through the code that we have in the program, and then we're going to take a look at, in a much larger sense, we're going to walk through this program step by step and really analyze and break down that if structure. So the first thing that we've got here at the top of our program are two import statements. We're importing both the scanner class and the decimal format class. And the reason that we're doing that is because we want to format our output. You can see here we have a declaration for a decimal format object. And then we're using the scanner class, of course, to get the input because we're reading everything in from the command line. We're then printing out the title of the program, Simple Calculator, then asking the user to enter a number. We are then going to get that number from the keyboard input, ask the user for a second number, get that number from a keyboard input, and since we don't know the type of number they may be putting in, I mean, when you look at a calculator, you can use decimal values in a calculator, and so we need to be prepared in our application to deal with that, and that is why I chose to allow the user to enter a double and to use the next double function. If we come down here to mathematical operation, we're simply printing out a statement that prints out the mathematical operator and the available mathematical operators and then their option numbers. We're then going to let the user make a choice, and since my numbers are 1, 2, 3, and 4, they're not fractional numbers, I've decided that I'm going to go ahead, and since I've only given them integers to pick from, I'm going to read that data in as an integer. Here we have sort of a preliminary if statement, and the idea behind this if statement is that we need to we need to do just some preliminary checking to make sure that whatever mathematical operation we decide to do, it is valid. So we've decided here that if the second number is 0 and the operator is 4 is division. If the second number is 0, that would be first number divided by second number. We cannot divide by 0. It is mathematically impossible. So I'm taking that into account here. I'm taking that into account and preventing them from mathematically dividing by 0 by checking that out in advance. If they do happen to be dividing by 0, I'm going to print out a message that says, "We're sorry, you can't divide by 0. Otherwise, if this test is false, and most of the time this test will be false, if this test is false, then what I'm going to do is print out the result of a formatted version of the calculate method. And the calculate method, as we see down here in our definition, takes two decimal numbers and an integer representing the operator. What we have here is a set of if statements that lay out what to do depending on the value of the operator. If the operator is 1, then we can assume they would like to do addition. Our user would like to do addition. And so it's going to take number 1 and add it to number 2 and return the resulting value. If the operator is 2, we can assume they want to subtract. And again, we're going to subtract the first number from the second number and return the resulting value. If they choose operator 3, we're going to assume they want multiplication. And we are going to return the first number multiplied by the second number. However, if they haven't chosen 1, 2, or 3, since their only options were 1, 2, 3, or 4, we can assume that if it isn't 1, 2, or 3, then they selected 4, and in which case we're going to go ahead and do division. Now, you may be wondering why I have return statements directly in here. I know some of you who have already started working on the homework at the time that this video is being posted have run into some problems with that. And we can use return statements as long as there is a return on every possible, what they call code branch. So every possible outcome, we're making sure a value is returned. Because remember, we've defined this method as a double. We've said that this method is going to return a decimal value between 14 and 15 digits after the decimal, or 15 or 16 digits after the decimal point. That's what we've decided in our method header, which defines our method. So that means that no matter what happens, no matter what value operator is, we have to make sure that something is returned, whether it's -5 or 156 million. And the only way to do that is, even if you're going to do else if, you have to have a catch-all else if you're going to return something. We're going to assume that they're only going to enter 1, 2, 3, or 4. Theoretically, if they entered 5, we're still going to do division. I don't know if that's what we would really want to do in the real world. I would want to do some additional checking in this application. Maybe if it was anything other than 1, 2, 3, or 4, I might send something back, like I might do something else, or send a different value back, or I don't know, something to let people know that something's gone wrong here. But for the purposes of this assignment, this is how it works. And again, this is going to be something that you're going to need to think about when you decide to write your season's assignment. Now, let's take a look and let's follow this through and watch the behavior of this for every mathematical operator. Now, keep in mind, when you're testing this, you're going to learn something about testing when it comes to decisions. You must test every option to make sure that it operates correctly. So you need to test every one of these tests that you have to make sure that it works correctly. I'm going to skip over the gathering of the user input, and instead I'm going to concentrate on the calculate method and this if statement right here that in my program starts on line 33. I'm not sure where it starts on your program. So I'm going to start walking through this program, and I'm going to be asked to enter a number. So I'm going to enter, we'll enter 2 and 2 this time. And for a mathematical operation, let's start out with addition and see how that works. So we're going to come, we get all of our data in, we get it stored in the variables, and we can see here that we have number 1 as a variable. It's a double. It's got the value 2.0. We see number 2. It's a double. Got the value 2.0. Operator, it's an integer, and we have the value 1. So we see that. We see all of those values. So now we're going to start asking ourselves some questions. We're asking the statement true or false. 2 is equal to 0. Well, that's a great big false. So we've got false and operator equal to 4. Operator is 1, so 1 equal to 4. That's also false. So this whole statement is false, because remember, the rule with AND is both sides must be true. If both sides are false, then we are not going to execute the code that comes immediately following the if. Instead, we're going to fall into the else. So, if we're right, we should go right into the else portion. And we are. We do go right into the else, because if this is false, we move to the first else. All right, so we execute this. What's this going to say? Well, we're going to print out the string, the result is, followed by the formatted result of the calculate method. So we're going to jump down into the calculate method, and we've passed in number 1, number 2, so our first and our second number, and our operator. So number 1 is the value is 2, number 2 the value is 2, and operator the value is 1. So now we're going to test, as we see this if statement here, we're going to test for the operator. 1 equal to 1. That is a true statement, so we're going to execute the code that comes right after the if. And in this case, it says return number 1 plus number 2. So since number 1 contains 2 and number 2 contains 2, our result is going to be 4. We're going to return that back up to here, which will complete the print line statement, and our result is down here below. Let's try that with the number 2. If I execute this again, and I'm going to give it 2 more numbers, I'm going to give it 2 and 2 again. This time I'm going to tell it to do subtraction. Again, we're going to test to make sure that number 2 is 2 equal to 0. 2 and 0 are not the same numbers, so this portion of the and is false. And we're going to check for operator. Is operator equal to 4? So does 2 equal 4? And because the current value of operator is 2, so does 2 equal 4? And the answer to that question is no. So we're going to go ahead and fall into the else portion, which is going to have us call the calculate method, format and display the result. So we're going to go down into the calculate method, and we're going to ask ourselves, is the operator 2? And in this case, the operator, is the operator equal to 1? Is 2 equal to 1? And the answer to that question is false. So rather than execute the code that comes immediately under, we're going to fall down to the next else. Now, in this case, the else happens to be coupled with an if. So we're going to run this test too. Is 2 equal to 2? And if it is, we're going to execute the code immediately following that if. So is 2 equal to 2? No, I'm afraid yes, I'm afraid that it is. So we're going to go ahead and subtract the value of number 1 from the value of number 2. In this case, number 1 contains the value 2, and number 2 contains the value 2, which means the result should be 0. Let's look at number 3, and then I think we're going to call it quits on this exercise. If we put in an option for 3, so this time I'm going to put in 2, and 2 again, and this time I'm going to select multiplication, which is option 3. Again, I'm asking myself, is the value of the second number 0? And it is not. 2 is not equal to 0. 2 and 0 are not the same. So that portion of the statement is false. And is 3, which is the operator option we chose, is 3 equal to 4? And in this case, it is not. So both of those are false. That means the whole and is false. So this whole complete statement is false. So we're going to drop down into the else, which is going to call our calculate method. Now we ask the question, is the operator we chose equal to 1? So is 3 equal to 1? And the answer is no. Is 3 equal to 2? And the answer is no. So if this is false, we're going to fall down to our next else, which is just below on the not the next line, but 2 lines down. So now we're going to ask the question, since we've hit this else, well, we got an if, so we're going to have the question, is 3 equal to 3? And that statement is true. Yes, 3 is equal to 3. So we're going to return the value of number 1 times the value of number 2. So the value of the first number is 2, and we're going to multiply it by the value of the second number, which is also 2. And so we should get 4. So we're going to go ahead and execute that statement and return the value 4. All right. So the idea here is when we have these else if deals, we're going to check against the first value, the first top of the if. We're going to scan. We're going to go through every line of the if statement essentially. So if operator is equal to 1, that's fine. Then we're going to execute the code that comes immediately below. But if it does not, if this is false, we go to the next else. If that's all that's there, then we execute the code underneath. But we can put a test in there. And if we have a test, then that test must be true, or we fall to the next one. And if this test is false, we go to the next else. Oh, there's no test here. So I'm just going to return this. Now, what if I wanted to rewrite this to use it as a switch? We saw the switch statement a little bit in the discussion, but we didn't really see it in action. So I'm going to alter this a little bit. What I'm going to do is just comment the if out so we can see it. And so you can see how it compares. So I'm just going to set up a block comment here. And I am going to set up a switch. So switch. And we're testing on operator. And we're testing equality with the values 1. And I'm just going to throw break statements in here just for the moment. 2. 3. And 4. Now I'm doing this a little differently. I'm not making the assumption that they're always going to put in 1, 2, 3, or 4. And because I'm not doing that, I'm going to define a double, and I'm going to call it result. And here's what we're going to do. If it's 1, we're going to assume addition. So I'm going to say result equal to number 1 plus number 2. If it's number 2, I'm going to assume subtraction. So result equals number 1 plus number 2. If it's number 3, I'm going to assume multiplication. Result equals number 1. Oops, I did plus here. I wanted minus. Here we're going to assume multiplication. And then lastly, we're going to assume division. All right. And then, of course, when we're finished, our method has to return something. So we are going to return result. Oh, variable might not have been initialized. We're going to set it equal to 0, so just so it has something. Again, because a variable has to have a value before we use it, and there is a possibility that the user enters 5 and nothing happens. So this is set up a little differently. When I'm doing if statements in a method, and the value and the result of the if statement is going to be returned because it's a procedural or a functional method, I usually do it this way. I store the result in a variable and return the variable at the very end. It gives me a little more control. So let's look at how this one is going to operate. I'm going to set my breakpoints here so we can work through this. And I'm going to show you what happens if you forget your breaks in your switch structures. Now remember, switch structures can only be used for integers, characters, and now in Java 7, strings, which is what we're using. We're using Java 7. If you're using Java 6, strings won't work. All right, so here we go. we're going to go ahead and enter our number. I'm going to use 2 again, and I'm going to enter 2, so it's going to be 2 and 2. And I'm going to do multiplication just because I want you to see how the case works. So we'll do multiplication. Again, here we still have our if. We're testing to make sure that the second number isn't 0. 2 equal to 0, that's false. We're checking to see that the operator is not equal to 4, and the operator is not equal to 4. And so operator is equal to 3. Both of these sides are false, so this whole big statement is false. So we're going to come down here. We're going to go ahead and execute the calculate method. I'm going to create my variable and assign it the value 0. I'm going to test operator against one of the values 1, 2, 3, and 4. Where do you think I'm going to end up? If you said under the case 3, you're correct. Watch what happens. We come straight down here. This evaluates very quickly. If you have a lot of choices, one value, one variable, and a lot of different choices for it, this works great. It's a lot faster than the if. Than the else if, because you have to test every single one. But it has its drawbacks. It has some limited functionality. We can't use it with decimal numbers, and in older versions of Java, you can't use it with strings. So there are some drawbacks to it, and we can't do anything funky like ranges or checking multiple items like we did up here. Up here, in one decision, we checked two pieces of criteria, the second number and the operator at the same time. I can't do that with the switch. I can only test one thing for equality. I can't test it for greater than, I can't test it for less than, I can't test it for greater than or equal to, simply equality. This is why it's so good for that menu option of choosing a mathematical operator, because it's a single value. We're not testing for a range. So the results of this, right? It was the option picked was 3, so we're going to multiply, store that result in result. We see the break here. The break statement means we're going to leave the switch structure and head down to our return statement, and then we're going to leave the method and print out the result. This is a good example of a switch structure. And this is a good example of the alternative if. Again, it doesn't work for everything. It won't work for everything. I wish it did. But the switch structure is really good when we're evaluating options like this, menu type options, where it can only be one possible value, when we're only testing one item for one value. It works really, really well. If you have any questions on this exercise, I know it was a little complicated to write, but in reality, it doesn't do much. I mean, it's a long program. I'm looking at 70 lines of code. And so you immediately look at, oh my God, it's 70 lines or 50, 60 lines, and oh my God, this is so complex. Yes, there's a lot of statements here, but they don't do anything really fancy. The plan for this program might be as simple as get the first digit, or the first number, get the second number, get what mathematical operation you want to perform, calculate and display the result. It's kind of that simple. I mean, the high-level look at this program is really simple. It's really simple, but it gets in depth pretty quickly. Again, if you have any questions on this, please let me know. You can email me at bsimbeck@ccac.edu, or you can stop by class and feel free to ask your questions. Thanks, and thanks for watching.